Welcome to all of our Becoming Your Best podcast listeners, wherever you may be in the world today. This is Steve Schallenberger, your host, and I have been so excited for the guests that we have today. And we are always so privileged that you would join us. So thank you to our listeners. This is going to be a refreshing insight and a whole different perspective on leadership from a different point of view. So I'd like to just tell you about this guest we have. He is the author of the best-selling new book, The Inside Innovator, a practical guide to entrepreneurship. And he has worked with some of the most recognized companies in the world, developing talented teams and achieving remarkable success for growth businesses. He's done this from multiple perspectives as an entrepreneur within large corporations, as a CEO and entrepreneur within smaller companies, and in a strategic industry leadership role. So welcome, Louis K. Gump.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to be here.
Yeah, Louis and I have been working on this for about a month to get together, so I'm glad we can finally do it. And before we get started, I'd like to tell you just a little bit more about Louis, and this is going to come out in our discussion today. He's president of Cambian Solutions, which focuses on excellence and innovation, business growth, and team performance. Earlier in his career, he presided over award-winning mobile businesses at the Weather Channel and CNN, and more recently, he has served as CEO of two digital media firms and led Cox Media, the advertising division of Cox Communication, the third largest cable provider in the U.S. Louis has also helped build leadership and held leadership roles in a wide ranges of industry and community organizations. So we're going to hear all about this. He earned an MBA from the University of Virginia, Darden School of Business, and a BA from Duke. So let's jump into it, Louis. If you don't mind, let's start off, and I'd like to invite you to tell us about your background, including any turning points in your life that's had a significant impact on you.
I'll be happy to do that. You know, as I was preparing for this, I realized often when answering a question like this one, I jump right in on the career. And then I learned some about the things you've written about and the ways that, you know, your life outside of work, at least officially, they're connected to your career. And so I wanted to start in a little bit different place and go way back here, although I'll fast forward quickly. I grew up in a small town in eastern Tennessee, in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. And that shaped my worldview a lot. I ended up going to college in North Carolina. I spent some time in Taiwan teaching English. I came back to the U.S. and moved to Atlanta. There's some kind of ancient history in a shipping company in Atlanta, New Jersey, and Boston, and then a graduate degree. And I ended up in Atlanta with this desire to make a difference and work with talented teams. And after a little bit of time, I ended up at the Weather Channel. And that was a huge turning point for me because I'd learned a little bit, in the classroom. I'd learned some in the workplace. And this was a chance to contribute to a well-recognized brand. And I ended up leading the mobile business for the Weather Channel. And we built it from something that had insignificant revenue and a very small footprint to one of the core platforms of the Weather Channel. That was really interesting. And at the same time, I got married while I was there to my now wife, and we have 3 kids. And so I was trying to do the juggling act the way so many people do in one, form or another. And then, we had 2 kids, and then I had the opportunity to go to CNN to do something very similar. And I ended up leading CNN Mobile worldwide as we built their strategy, hired a team. And I want to emphasize, we were supported by so many around us. And I realized even more clearly what can happen when you just have this amazing brand, you have resources and a commitment to move forward. I was, as you mentioned, privileged to lead a couple of small digital media companies. One of the ways that's important for this conversation is that I learned the contrast even more clearly between being an entrepreneur and what you could or couldn't do and how you do it, and being an entrepreneur. And I learned it up close and personally. And then I had a chance to join Cox Media as their leader with offices from San Diego in the Southwest to Providence in the Northeast, and really gain new perspective with another amazing company. So with that as background and then a commitment to giving back in the community, there was this big mix of kind of a personal journey and then career and then community involvement. It's been very fulfilling. And I had a desire to give back and share a little bit.
Well, I so love being involved with podcasts, Lewis, because it's the opportunity to work with people who have devoted their lives, become extraordinary in different areas. And Lewis and I were talking about our respective books and the work that we're doing, and becoming your best, and innovation, and having ideas and being able to make them a reality. I mean, we are right down the same avenue here, and it was so fun. I've got to tell you, folks, to our listeners, in this case, I have completely gone through Lewis's book in advance, and I highly recommend it. There's so many solid, good ideas, whether you are an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur or just somebody relating with others in relationships, a family, for example. So these principles apply across the board. They're excellent. Lewis, what is an entrepreneur, and why should this type of work be encouraged?
Okay, so first of all, thank you so much for those kind comments. They mean a lot, and especially now that I've had a chance to become more acquainted with what you've done and the principles you teach and the way you go about it. So just thanks so much. And then with entrepreneurship specifically, it's a very simple definition from my perspective, and that is the practice of creating value through innovation and growth within a larger organization. Again, it's the practice of creating value through innovation and growth within a larger organization. And this can be in a for-profit environment, in a company. What I've also found, especially after doing some research on the topic, is that these principles apply in nonprofits, charitable nonprofits. They apply in education and schools. They apply in government and beyond. So you can find a lot of different places where this is relevant to one's life and career and relationships. And it's important because, well, there are actually 4 takeaways in the book, and I can go through them in a second, but it really is part of creating new value and realizing the potential of organizations when you boil it down. The 4 ways that I found after writing the book and then drafting the conclusion, I found, wow, there are these 4 themes. And one of them is that it helps organizations to adapt. I think we all recognize there's a lot of change around us. And when organizations adapt, they become relevant not only for new customers and stakeholders, but also for people they've been serving for years. Another one is that entrepreneurship provides amazing opportunities for the next generation of leaders. And companies that do it well essentially are bringing along some of the best and the brightest and most motivated and most naturally aligned with an organization. Another one, and I didn't see this one coming as much, although in hindsight it's pretty obvious, and that is entrepreneurship results in some really life-changing and organization-changing opportunities for entrepreneurs. Because what happens is typically entrepreneurs are creating something new, they're doing it in a new way, and they need help, they need support, they need to work with others. And that turns into partnerships with smaller companies that have done something innovative that no one else has done before. Also, sometimes these companies, they've created a platform that's better across different companies. And a company like the Weather Channel or CNN as a customer really helps not only with revenue, but also with reputation. And then lastly, and closing where I started, it creates new value. Essentially, the thing that looks like less than 1% of the value of a company today might be the biggest value of tomorrow.
Well, okay, that's great. There's some significant impacts here of entrepreneurship. And can we talk about what are some of the insights that you have of the things that makes a successful entrepreneur? And he, by the way, the whole book is on this, so I don't know how Lewis is going to answer this question. But what are the top 3 or 4 things that you could do? And let's dive into those.
Okay, so as we're doing this, are you thinking more of the characteristics of entrepreneurs or what you can?
Yes. Uh huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with the characteristics, as you've already seen, I found 16 of them. And I will say
Yep.
at the beginning that I've been around the block once or twice on prioritization, and I was willing to squeeze them down. However, it turned out that the best entrepreneurs have all of those, but there were a top five. And here are the top five. The first one, and by far the most common, is curiosity. As I did my interviews, and I did 33 interviews with various people who have been successful in a range of types of organizations. Curiosity, either as a word or as a description that amounted to this, came up in every single interview without exception. If you have somebody who's not inquisitive, not as eager to explore, they might be very successful in a bunch of roles, but it's going to be hard to be a great entrepreneur. The next one is action orientation. If you have someone who likes to tinker and explore and discover, that's fine. You also need to be able to turn that into something that results in value. Otherwise, it's going to be
Mhm.
difficult to be a successful entrepreneur in many different types of organizations. The next one, and this is one that sometimes contrasts with entrepreneurs, and that is an elevated ability to build bridges. An entrepreneur typically has to work with people within an organization in lots of different ways: your peers, your superiors, people who report into you, partners, people in far-flung parts of the organization. And you have to have different communication styles, skills, interests, and knowledge bases to do that. The next one, an entrepreneur must be risk tolerant. Uh, they can be calculated risks. They must, evaluate. But on the other hand, at a certain point, you have to try things that may or may not work, because a lot of the things that happen, especially the biggest ones, you're trying things for the first time. And even if they eventually result in success, you might end up with plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, and then you end up succeeding with plan E. And the last one that I would point to in the top five is optimism, and a specific type of optimism, and that is grounded optimism. Someone who sees the positive, lifts people up, kind of has a vision and moves towards it, and also can blend that, can meld in, can temper it with a sense of what is realistic and what can happen, and then convey that through communication.
Lewis, from your experience, can anyone be an entrepreneur?
So, I've thought about this question a lot, and I've never been one to really discourage others from trying things. However, what I would say is that it helps to have self knowledge here. Uh, it, I suppose that just about anyone can become an entrepreneur someplace, somehow, especially if it's an area where they have, a lot of interest and passion. However, my experience is that it's very difficult for some folks. Here are a couple
Yeah.
of ways that it would be difficult. One of them is if you don't have that curiosity and desire to learn. And I want to be careful here. I don't have a value judgment on it particularly. There are some people, for example, who are perfectly happy to optimize for efficiency, to do things really, really well. And they might be
Mhm.
less interested in pushing the boundaries of new things. But my goodness, you get them, producing widgets, you get them serving customers the same way over and over again, they might be amazing. But it would be difficult to be an entrepreneur. There are several other ways that is difficult. One is if you don't have risk tolerance. If you're the type of person who, you insist on making straight A's always, and if you don't, it's gonna kind of throw you for a massive loop. That might be tough for you, because here you are, you're going to be trying things, and you'll probably have a pretty good batting average, especially over time. But every now and again, something's not going to work. So you got to have the ability to and willingness to fail and turn that into success.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about you talking about this person who, making the widgets, and but really, top entrepreneurs are going to be thinking, how can we make this widget better? They're curious, they're always thinking, and that's how they create value for their organizations. That's different.
It is different. I'll add one more, and I know we may chat a little bit more about this one. For people who have a really hard time having bosses or have a really hard time playing in the
Mm.
sandbox with a lot of other people, this also might be a bit higher mountain to climb. And the reason is these organizations, it could be an organization of a few dozen people, roughly. It could be an organization of a few thousand or tens of thousands, but there are a lot of stakeholders here. And if you're the person who says, I don't like to be told what to do, or you're the person who says, hey, I want to create something valuable, but I want to do it my way always, this is a tough road. And so you want to find somebody who is either willing to be or is naturally inclined to be collaborative or both.
Yeah, and this really is a great time to talk about what's the difference between an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur, because sometimes you're describing qualities that sometimes exist with an entrepreneur. They're a lone wolf, they have to do it their way. I think we ought to talk about the differences, and because they're both important, right? It's just like you said, you started out, you kind of need to know yourself so that you can be in the right place. What have you seen? What are the differences, Lewis?
Well, there are quite a few. One of them is the scope of the organization and the span of control. The definition of an entrepreneur typically is someone who owns or has founded a business or other organization or both. And an entrepreneur we discussed before. And so if you're coming into an organization that already exists, it has a brand, it has product or service offerings, then you have to recognize that part of your mission is your specific mandate, but also part of it is to be a steward of that larger brand and organization. Another one is processes, because typically these larger organizations, they'll have processes for evaluating what's going to be greenlit to move ahead, what's not going to be. And if you're an entrepreneur and you just want to kind of make the decision and go, maybe you have a board of directors, but if you don't have some amount of tolerance and understanding of how to navigate through an organization that has priorities that are far beyond your initiative, no matter how important it is, that's also a pretty tough slog. In addition to that, these larger organizations tend to have resources that very few entrepreneurs are lucky enough to have. They have teams of people, many of whom have years, decades of experience and can help teach. One of the best ways that we were successful in, for example, launching a new generation of apps at the Weather Channel was because we had access to legal specialists and HR specialists and technology specialists and product specialists and partnerships. And we didn't really have to create many of those. We just had to build on the platform that was already there. And lastly, one that comes up often in my conversations today and came up often in the interviews is the level of risk. Because if you're an entrepreneur, you have a larger organization, which typically has the cash flow and other assets that come with that organization. So you can go in, you can try things, you can experiment. Many entrepreneurs, and I've been there, I know what it's like when you don't know if you're going to make payroll in a month. And that's tough. In most entrepreneurial situations, that's not your top priority or concern. You can be confident about the paycheck that is coming and rewarding good work. And so you get to choose the amount of risk that you're going to take on. For some people, entrepreneurship is really the ideal balance of creation and innovation and serving customers while managing your own personal and professional risk.
Yeah, I must admit, when I was probably about 42, I was involved in an international organization, and I had been running my own companies for 20 years. And they are different worlds. I mean, different skill sets, right? And so you do have to adapt. But I must admit, I really enjoyed the entrepreneurship. It was for me, it was motivating, exciting to be around other people, and to make a contribution was really a big deal. But it was a lot less stressful for me than being an entrepreneur. I mean, everything's on the line, and so they're different worlds. And you talk about a number of things. So first of all, I just want to say that was a happy time for me. It was a happy time for my family being in the entrepreneur world and being a principal in a nice sized company right now. One of our companies, we have worked careers with people, whole careers, and they're so satisfying to do it together with other people. So I think why I loved your book. But it is a different set of, it's a different world. So my next question has to be, and we need both, right? They're both important in our world. How can you be a really great entrepreneur? What can you do? If you're starting right now, what would you recommend to somebody to learn the skills, to make the contributions? What are the best things that somebody could do? Whether they're 25 or 35 or 45, right in that kind of whole range of their career, really moving it forward.
Sure. And I speak to this some in the book. I would pick up with the theme that you mentioned and have awareness that there isn't a value judgment about good or bad here. This is about
No,
fit. And it's also about fit at a certain time in life. You mentioned, for example, that in your 40s, you went into a larger organization, and that might have felt like you were getting a warm bath after kind of being out exposed to the elements for a while with, various worthy endeavors as an entrepreneur. So, but both the nature of the practices and also timing, they're relevant. And that comes to self-understanding. And that's what I suggest and why I started the book there with, start with the inner game. Start understanding yourself and what's important to you, what motivates you, what you're good at, and then take it from there. For people who are in a situation where they want to do this and they're already in the organization, it's scanning for opportunity also, because it's one thing to have a
right.
whole lot of ideas. It's another thing to narrow down to a few that both could be transformative if that's what you're looking for, and also are aligned with the strategy of the organization. I want to do a quick kind of call out here. Not all entrepreneurship needs to be transformative. Some of it is iterative. You can find ways to improve an organization over time. There's a great example in the book that Quint Studer gave about his dad. And his dad was a mechanic for diesel locomotives. And in hindsight, Quint, who's a very accomplished healthcare executive, said, you know what? His dad was an entrepreneur. He didn't want to go out on his own and repair diesel engines, although he could have, but he was called on from all over the country to fix things that no one else could. That's an example of entrepreneurship. Another one I would say is think about how you interact with people. You may or may not be in a position to build a team at this point, but look at the ways that you build relationships and develop the skills to, for example, if you're with somebody who's no nonsense, I just want the facts, develop the ability to say that really quickly. If you're with someone who is more relationship oriented, and every organization that I've been a part of has had people like that in it, then take the time to get to know people and do it before you need something, if and when you ever need something, largely because you want to get to know them. And then there is a rubber hitting the road sort of aspect to this, where you build a strategy, you make a plan. I speak in the book about something that I suspect is, you and I are both aligned on, related to principles and values and goals. So I won't go too deeply on that, other than to acknowledge it's very important. At a certain point, you got to get going. You have a certain vision, set of goals, and you put together the team, and you say, okay, within this period of time, we're going to build and deploy this product or this service. And oh, by the way, my experience is that's best done if you already have in mind the next 2 or 3 steps. I'll share with you an example. In 2001, 2, and 3 at the Weather Channel, our team built a series of mobile apps that most people have forgotten about now using Java, Brew, Windows, and Symbian. And we established credibility within the organization and demand within the marketplace. And then we built some video and that worked. And then we built mobile web and that worked. And then we built advertising on top of mobile web and the revenue started coming in. And then we came back around 7, 8 years later and we launched game-changing iPhone and Android apps, which were some and still are some of the most downloaded phone apps of all time, and they're built and sustained by talented teams today. Although that now is in my rearview mirror, and so what you're doing is essentially building a platform for yourself and others to create value for customers.
Oh, that's a really good answer. I was just thinking while you're talking, Lewis, that in addition to helping somebody in their career as a successful entrepreneur, your book would be amazing to help them out, The Inside Innovator. And I might say, without wanting to be too biased, also Becoming Your Best, the 12 Principles of Highly Successful Leaders. These create a foundational basis based on principles to be successful. I mean, the research shows the impact is 100% predictable if you do certain things that creates excellence. And so I love what you're talking about, and these are good principles. We're kind of getting to the end of our interview, but I did want to squeeze in another question because you talked about your interviews with people that have been quite successful in this area. What are some of the things that really impressed you most from your interviews that would help somebody be successful?
So I entered the interviews with a hypothesis, and the hypothesis is that entrepreneurship is its own thing. And I often heard it referred to as corporate entrepreneurship or something like that, which is not, in my estimation, wrong. On the other hand, I find it limiting and risky to use that term alone. And what I found over and over again was proof of the hypothesis that entrepreneurship is distinct from entrepreneurship. And there is a set of skills that if you use them, to your point earlier, you dramatically increase the probability of success. I've actually started reading your book as well. And I would agree with you. If you combine kind of a broad principle base with kind of some skills, because this book is designed to be practical, then really you can build something super special here. Another thing I found is how common it is. And I referred to this earlier. I entered this process thinking, hey, I think there are at least, some people who do this around. I've worked with a lot of them, and I found more and more. But then, for example, I was talking with John Hancock, who is CEO of Junior Achievement of Georgia. And he said, Lewis, this sounds a lot like me. And, he is leading a group that makes a tremendous impact for lots of people around the state of Georgia. He's also part of a national organization. And so he simultaneously is building the brand and serving customers and also serving audiences here. And so it was just fascinating to talk with people. And one last thing, and I heard this over and over again, for people who find themselves gravitating to this, there's a concept of serial intrapreneurship. We hear of serial entrepreneurship, but people do it over and over again. They're some of the biggest people assets, some of the biggest cheerleaders of companies, and some of the biggest mentors and best that I've ever seen.
Great. Yeah, that is so good. Well, this has been a great interview today. I'm always kind of really in shock of how fast it goes. And here we are at the end. Any final tips you'd like to leave with our listeners today, Lewis?
Thanks, Steve. So I was thinking about this one also, and I have something that's not in the book. And it's broadly applicable. I've been thinking about it with family and at work lately. And that is, if you can't find your keys, look first in your pockets. I've been talking with a lot of people who are trying to decide what they're going to do with their career. And often they already have the answers. It's right within. They understand it. And with a little bit of conversation, and especially with a little bit of writing, that unfolds. But I also mean it literally, because around our house, at least once or twice in the last month, we've been looking for something, and then one or the other of us stuck our hand in the pocket and it was right there. So literally and figuratively, I think that's good guidance.
A great analogy. Well, how can people find out about what you're doing?
Oh, thanks for asking. They can go to lewisgump.com, and there is information on the book. We've just posted some resources, including a book club guide, because we were hearing from folks who wanted to use this book for their book club. They can also go to their favorite online retailer, or in many cases, bookstore, and find the book. And it's an exciting time. And if they have ideas or comments, I always love to hear from readers and others who are interested in the topic. Oh, and one last one, I suppose, LinkedIn as well. I'm available there.
Okay, good. Well, it's been a thrill to have you with us, Lewis. What a treat! And so this has been Lewis K. Gump, everybody, and we wish you all the best and all of the good that you're doing. I love your message.
Thank you, Steve. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks, and to our listeners, thank you for joining in today. We're grateful for you. We wish you the best. You're here because you're working on becoming your best and gaining new ideas. Well, today we got some really fun ideas. So thank you, and we wish you the best. This is Steve Schallenberger, your host, signing off.